With the release of Stranger Things Season 4 Volume 2, we now have 4 completed seasons of Stranger Things, and I decided I would rank all of them from the worst to the best, in of course my own personal opinion. We're only going to get one more season of this show, probably within the next 2 years, I hope. I hope we don't have to wait 3 years like we did for Season 4, but maybe we'll do it again after Season 5, but for now, let's just rank the 4 seasons. This show is incredible, like one of my favorite shows of all time. I think it's almost perfect completely. There's not many things I dislike about it, and that stays pretty consistent throughout all 4 of the seasons. So even though I have an order here, they're honestly mostly interchangeable. Like there isn't that big of a difference from each of them. I even think the last place on this list is still a really great season. But then like the top spot is like just absolutely amazing, almost a masterpiece. So they're all really solid, essentially, at least really solid seasons. There's certain things that also remain completely consistent within each of them that I don't feel like repeating again and again, because I'm going to talk about the positives and the negatives of each season when I go through them. But like I said, some of the things just remain kind of consistent, so I thought I would just kind of mention them right now in the intro. First of all, the soundtrack. Obviously, the soundtrack has always been incredible in this show, whether it's the licensed music and the way they utilize licensed music or the original score. It's all incredible. The writing surrounding the characters and the way they're developed has always been really solid. The directing and the shots and cinematography of the show is fantastic. The choreography of the action scenes has always been really top tier. And for a TV show, it has some really damn good special effects. And I would say to the later seasons, the more recent seasons, it's got movie quality special effects. So, and it's all visual effects and the CGI, all of it is just absolutely incredible. So yeah, there's a lot of positives to talk about with this whole show, but let's just jump right into it and get through this list. Coming in last place in the number 4 spot is going to be Season 2, which I think this is pretty consistent with most people's last place. It's not a bad season, obviously. Like I just said before, this season is still really damn great. Like I love Season 2 of Stranger Things, but it is the weakest out of all 4 of them. So just for some positives right off the bat, this season has a much bigger budget, so you can tell that it upgraded substantially from Season 1, which is great because Season 1 obviously didn't have the highest budget in the world, so some of the effects and such weren't as up to par with what you would hope they would be. But once they got into Season 2, they were able to make things bigger, the quality was better, and it felt like almost like a completely upgraded show in terms of that department. Obviously not completely with everything, but certain things, yes, you felt like it upgraded in terms of a lot of different things, mainly in terms of the CGI, which just looked a lot better as a whole. So I think Season 2 did great with that. I really like the Gremlins inspired story here with the Demodogs. It was really well done, and obviously the show does that a lot, where they kind of take inspirations from like classic 80s films, sometimes even some films from the 70s and such. They do a lot of stuff like that in this show, and I really love it. I feel like this whole show is paying homage to these old classic films. And Gremlins, their story was definitely taken into account within the story with all the Demodogs, especially because Dart was like the gizmo essentially that they were first trying to raise, and then eventually Dustin realizes that it is turning into a Demodog, and he didn't realize that at first. I really like that storyline with Dart within the season, and in the end, Dart still remains his closeness to Dustin, which was really cool that even the Demodogs could still be, like, they still have some sort of a human connection if you force it, right? But all the other Demogorgons and stuff they come across later never had those prior connections, so they're just these monsters that just go out for killing. But this was kind of cool to see Dart actually not try to kill Dustin when he saw him, so there's definitely an animalistic instinct in these monsters that we really didn't know about before, so I thought that was really cool. The season has this whole Halloween theme to it. Some of the other seasons have a holiday theme as well, but Season 2 has the Halloween theme. It takes place around Halloween. Also, the season released during Halloween, which the other seasons all released during the spring to summer months. So I thought that was really unique, really cool that this season released in October. And just, I love Halloween, so having a whole season surrounded around that was just really damn awesome. The Hopper and Eleven story here is, I think, some of the strongest stuff with this season. Not the 11 stuff later on in the second half, but I mean the stuff that starts off in the first couple episodes, where Hopper is now the guardian slash parent of 11, and I really like their interactions at first. I really like how they kind of deal with each other, and how 11 doesn't really want to be staying there. She wants to see Mike, she wants to get out, you know, and see the world, but of course Hopper knows that's just not something they can do because it'll put her at risk. And I really like how he becomes very fatherly to her, because he did have his own daughter and he of course lost her, and that was a really important part of season 1. So I really like how his character was brought to be this fatherly figure to 11 in the season. They do a lot of great stuff with that, and the way they work together in the end to close the gate of the season was really cool. This is probably the season where Will had the most focus. Of course, they were focusing on finding him in season 1, but in terms of his actual character, season 2 did a lot with him, dealing with the aftermath of him being stuck in the Upside Down. He had a lot of PTSD from it, and also a lot of physical symptoms from being there and having that slug thing down his throat. And it was really cool seeing him kind of almost have these exorcist type responses to this smoke monster that was like trying to get into him, the Mind Flayer, of course, which I think is a really cool villain from the season. It's not necessarily like a personified villain, but it's just more of a like a monster, which we then learn about way more in season 4, which was cool. And I really like how they deal with that, and I like how it does take inspiration from The Exorcist in a lot of ways with how they deal with Will and this issue. There's also a Nancy and Jonathan romance here, which I think was really well done, and Steve kind of has this redemption arc this season. He kind of started at the end of season 1, but then it continued here, and Steve was just really, really solid this season. And honestly, I think the only like negative about the season that I really have is how 11's story goes into the latter half of the season, where they do this whole separate episode where she kind of just goes off to explore her sister. And I wasn't against that idea. I just think it kind of slowed the pacing of the season. It was a completely separate story from everything else that was happening. So to kind of just make us do that for an episode just kind of felt off for Stranger Things. It definitely wasn't something I expected from Stranger Things. I believe they were planning like a spin-off or something with the character of 8, but because people didn't like the episode, they decided not to do it anymore. I would still like her character to be included in the series somehow, hopefully in a season 5 maybe, but I just think when you have so much stuff going on in season 2 and there was this really big cliffhanger at the end of episode 6, you can't just jump into some completely new story and then not pick up that cliffhanger until episode 8. Like, that's gonna piss some people off. And the story ultimately only had a minor effect on the overarching story. It had a big effect on 11 and her kind of finding herself and realizing that she wants to go back with her family. But like, we didn't really need the whole 45 minutes of it. You know what I mean? That's kind of the issue I had with it there. And as a whole, this season doesn't have as many memorable moments or as much emotion as some of the later seasons. You have really great moments like Bob and what he does in episode 8. Episode 8 as a whole was really fantastic. And then of course his death was really, really sad, obviously, but it wasn't like this really emotional gut-punching thing like we see in pretty much every other season. So I think season 2 definitely lacks a lot of that. It also lacks a lot of the mystery that I feel like some of the other seasons had. It had some, but not nearly as much, and I don't think it was as compelling as the other seasons. But it's still, in its own right, is an incredible season. I love season 2, but it's gotta be the worst. Coming in the number 3 spot is season 1. So this is a hard one to put it here because it's the first one, of course. I have a lot of nostalgia for this season. I did watch it when it first came out, and I was hooked so damn quickly. This was just such an incredible start to a series. So first of all, the mystery surrounding this season was definitely the best mystery any of these seasons had. I always like the mysteries for the most part, but season 1's mystery was just so well developed, and there was no way you could possibly predict what was coming next. Like, I physically could not predict what was going to happen, and there's so many surprises that go on within the story. When the pieces start kind of coming together by the end of the season, it's really satisfying the way this whole season wraps up. I really, really love it. You had a lot of mysteries. You had the mystery about Will and him missing, and then he just appears dead in episode 3, but obviously we kind of learn throughout the season that there's other stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on with this Hawkins lab, and you learn a lot about the Hawkins lab. You learn about 11 and the mystery about 11, the Upside Down, the Demogorgon, all these different things that are just kind of talked about within the season. We kind of learn more and more about it through different groups, which all these seasons do this where they have different groups kind of split up. That's the one thing about season 2. It actually doesn't have as many split up groups as the other seasons do, which I didn't think was necessarily a negative about season 2. But all the other seasons, including season 1, the characters are kind of all doing their own thing and not necessarily interacting with each other all that much, like between the groups. Like you have in this season, you have Nancy, Jonathan. You basically have them split up by their ages, I guess, because the kids are all kind of doing their thing together. The older kids are doing their thing together. And then you have the adults, essentially. Like, that's kind of how this season's split up. Whereas in the later seasons, they kind of mix and match it a little bit more, which I really, really like how they do that. They don't just keep the groups the exact same. But I really like how these groups kind of all come together in the end because they all have a connection to what's happening. So obviously the kids, they run with 11, so obviously now they're connected into what's going on because of that. And they're also, of course, friends with Will, and Will's the kid who's missing. And then obviously Joyce is involved. Hopper has this really, really big motivation to find Will because of his daughter, losing his daughter, which I think was such a well-written decision for his character to find a way to make him care so much about finding Will, because otherwise I don't really believe that Hopper would have such a deep motivation for it, because of course I expect the cops to give a shit. I expect them to try at least, but Hopper goes above and beyond to find Will, and that kind of starts because of his backstory with his daughter and losing his daughter. And I love how it all kind of wraps up by the end of the season, and he kind of redeems himself by saving Will. Now that plays such a bigger role in season 4 as well, because season 4, Hopper reveals that it was actually, he blames himself for the death of his daughter because he didn't have to have a kid in the first place. He knew there was a big risk because of his exposure to Agent Orange in the Vietnam War, and he just did it anyways. And I really like that extra layer to his character because it makes this moment in season 1 where he does save Will so much more impactful. And the way they do that scene where they showcase like flashbacks of him seeing his daughter dying when she has cancer and she finally died, it was like such a sad moment, but he's rescuing Will in the same moment. Like, it's just so, it's so well done. Winona Ryder's performance in this season was probably the best performance this season had. Her being this just struggling mother who's just trying to find her son, it was just so damn compelling. And there were so many unique things that they do with her character, like the way she puts the lights all around her house to try to communicate with her son, and the way she finds out that she's even able to do that in the first place is just so unique, and I think handled perfectly. I think Eleven's story, the kind of E.T.-esque feel of Eleven's story here, was probably one of the best parts of this season, and her interactions with the other kids, they were all very, very well done. And then of course the Jonathan, Steve, and Nancy story, which I actually really liked as well. I think those characters had a lot of fun moments to them, and they have both had a reason to be involved in it, because Nancy was trying to look for Barb, and of course Jonathan was looking for Will, so they both had a reason to care about the whole situation, and they all had a reason to get involved in everything, and I think it was awesome. And then when they finally see the Demogorgon at the end of the season, that shit was awesome for the first time, seeing that Demogorgon come out. But the only negative I have to say about this season, because it was the first season, yes, the budget wasn't all that high, so stuff like the Demogorgon in that episode looked a bit iffy compared to what they do in the later seasons. I mean, holy shit, like everything they do in season like 3 and 4 is just wow, it looks amazing. Even season 2 upgraded substantially, but this first season, definitely you could tell it's, you know, your typical TV show type visual effects. It's nothing too crazy, but it doesn't even come close to ruining how incredible this season is as a whole. Now for the top 2, honestly, razor thin difference between these two. I can honestly change this, these can alternate, I don't really care, but I'm still gonna find an order for it, and I think this order works, but again, depends on the day, depends on the mood I'm feeling, because both of these seasons, they both kind of do different things for me. So one of the seasons is mainly about fun action and just, you know, crazy action-packed intensity, whereas the other one's more about horror and emotion and character drama, and they're very different seasons, but they both work so damn well. So number two is going to be season 3. Again, razor thin difference here, but season 3, by far the most action-packed season. If you are a fan of action and that's all you really care about, season 3 is definitely your go-to season. I love a lot of the action they have here. So first of all, you have action with the Flayed, which are the people who are kind of possessed by the Mind Flayer, essentially, and which I think after season 4 we kind of learned it was technically Vecna, so technically Vecna is possessing them, but whatever. Really cool stuff here, how they're all kind of possessed by this Mind Flayer thing. The way they all have like extra like abilities, like, you know, strength and stuff, especially with the way they utilized Billy here, who was this asshole in season 2, but then he comes into season 3 and he starts it off again being an asshole, but they make his, you know, assholishness turn into an actual villain of this season. And I love how they utilize this, because the actor who plays Billy is just phenomenal at what he does. So when he gets to perform in this season, oh, he performs, man. He is terrifying, especially in that sauna test episode. Holy shit, he is like, wow. It was amazing. But the action scenes they do with him, with Eleven, you know, fighting him and such, was just so good. And then the monster that we get from later on, when the Flayed kind of come together to this like blob monster thing, it was also really damn amazing. And then it comes together to make this really big monster by the end of the season, where they have to fight it in the Starcourt Mall. So damn awesome. So damn awesome. There's a lot of amazing scenes in this season that involves the Flayed, with different characters fighting it, like when Jonathan and Nancy were fighting the Flayed within, I believe it was in a hospital at one scene, because they were checking on Miss Driscoll. And holy shit, I mean, there's just, again, I'm just going off about it because it was so cool, but again, the action here is just really well done. And then don't forget about the damn Russians. I mean, the Russians being involved in here. You have Hopper being chased by a literal Terminator, practically. I mean, it's one of the Russians who literally acts like the Terminator, walks like the Terminator, and attacks Hopper like the damn Terminator. And all of that was amazing. And then it leads into the very end of the season, where he actually fights him right by that like gate opening machine, and leads to a very emotional scene where Hopper has to accept his fate, essentially. But thankfully he lived into season 4, but I really liked how they did it regardless. I'm not usually a big fan of fake out deaths, but this is one that I feel like actually worked really damn well, because it was incredibly emotional, but they didn't make us think he was dead for too long, and the way he lived was pretty believable. So I think it was a fake out death that worked. The emotional impact definitely still had meaning, and like I said, I absolutely loved how they handled that. Again, with the Russians, there was a lot of stuff with the Russians here. I love the Russian base that was under the Starcourt Mall, and you had the group of Dustin, Erica, Robin, and Steve, and them kind of like trying to figure out what was going on with this Russian base. A really interesting mystery going on in that Russian base, and then everyone kind of gets involved with it towards the end of the season, and they become a really big part of what's going on here. It's also really great how the cast all comes together by the end of the season, and I think it's one of the best like ways they come together. Like the other seasons always have usually pretty cool ways that the cast come together by the end of the season, but this way was just amazing. The way it was all at the Starcourt Mall, and then we have this incredible battle against the big Flayed monster, whereas other people go to the Russian base to try to stop, you know, the gate from being open, obviously. And then we also get, I think, one of the best scenes with Dustin and Susie singing the Never Ending Story song, and while they're all trying to do this plan here, this whole mission, because they're trying to lead away the Flayed monster at certain points. Again, all just incredibly done. I also love how this season is very summer themed. It's 4th of July themed. It's very colorful. Like, this got to a point in the 80s where everyone's dressing in the most colorful clothes they can possibly wear, and it's really cool. And Hawkins in this season really feels like a really important piece to the story, more so than it ever has before, which I think was really cool to see. Nancy's reporter story here was great too. Like, they had a lot of interesting things going on there that all played a significant role in the season and the story here. So I don't know, man. There was so much to happen this season. I can go on and on about it. I think Billy's redemption in the end was also a really beautiful moment, and the way Eleven was talking to him, and yeah, shit. This is one of the best seasons for sure. It's got to be. The only thing I could possibly say is a negative, Maybe there's a couple of over-the-top moments that are a little over the top, even though it's really fun. It's stuff that maybe they could have dialed back the goofiness a little bit, but there's not that many moments like that. There's just a couple maybe, but it's fun. This is definitely the most fun season. It's most action-packed, and I really do love that. But what do I love even more than fun, action-packed stuff? Very emotional, character-driven stories with a lot of horror elements. And season 4 has that up the wazoo, man. This is by far the most emotional season, is by far the most horror-filled season, and it takes inspiration from some of my favorite pieces of media ever. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here. This season has such a big importance on mental illness and depression and the way you can overcome those things. Specifically with Max's character, I think that's definitely the character who we see with this happening the most, but all of Vecna's victims have some relation to that, where they're dealing with something traumatic in their life and they're trying to overcome it, and that's who he kind of targets. And what's really, really cool is the way they utilize music, because music has been such an important part to Stranger Things for this entire, the past 3 seasons, but they find a way to integrate music into the story, which is so brilliant. The fact that they could do that was just amazing. And obviously they do it with one of the best songs they could have possibly have chosen, with the Running Up That Hill, and the way they reuse that song throughout the season to show its importance to Max and how it kind of allowed her to overcome Vecna and defeat him, or get past him at least at first, and then not really defeat him in the end, but just stop him temporarily, I guess. And so much amazing stuff happens in episode 9. I'll get to that in a second, but even just before that, even for volume 1, it was already almost like my favorite season. It was already becoming my favorite season just from that first volume. The way they take inspiration from Nightmare on Elm Street with Vecna as the villain was so amazing. Just from the first episode alone, I was so excited to see what happened in the end of the first episode with Chrissy getting killed in a kind of Nightmare on Elm Street-esque way. So cool. Loved all the visions she was seeing. It really felt like she was walking through like a haunted house almost. And Max has the same things happening to her, where it's almost like she's walking through a haunted house in certain scenes when Vecna is cursing her. And then 11 is essentially the Dream Master by the end of the season, where she gets to actually go into Max's mind and help her out by the end of the season, which I thought was really cool as well. Vecna as a whole was an incredible villain. By far the best villain of Stranger Things. I would say is the definitive villain of Stranger Things, basically like the Thanos of Stranger Things. Obviously, we find out that he was kind of behind everything. He had such an importance to this entire series, and it kind of wraps everything up together very nicely and explains a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily explained in previous seasons, and I thought it was amazing. The way he looks as well is very, very terrifying. He's a very threatening villain, and the actor just does a great job portraying it. And the way they reveal that it was one and also Henry Creel was so cool. It was so well done, the way they reveal that in those flashbacks with 11. It was just amazing. Another thing I really like about the season is that the groups aren't connected at all. It's not like other seasons where they come back together by the end of it, but they're still working on the same goal by the end. And I thought that was kind of a unique change of pace, where they don't come together physically, but they come together in terms of what they're actually trying to accomplish, because they all understand how the Upside Down works. So they just utilize their knowledge on the Upside Down and work on the same stuff together without even having that much information. Like Hopper and Joyce and such, they have no idea about Vecna, but they just know their kids are in danger. So they're like, let's go take out these Demogorgons and such at the Russian base, which was awesome. Like all the stuff at the Russian base in this season was pretty cool. It had a slow build up with Hopper trying to get out, I will say, but I really loved how it all turned out in the end. And Hopper's character had some amazing moments here. Like his talk with Enzo, I know his real name's not Enzo, but that's what I like to call him. His talk with Enzo was amazing. The way he was talking to Enzo and explaining how he was the reason his daughter died at such a young age. It was really emotional and it was amazingly done. And then he gets to reunite with Joyce, he reunites with 11, and all those scenes were just so good. And then I would say my favorite stuff from this season is everything in Hawkins. I really love the story in Hawkins with the group trying to figure out what was going on, And you also have obviously Eleven and what she's doing at the lab in Nevada, and that stuff was great. I would say I didn't think it was the best stuff, but it was solid. And then stuff with the Jonathan, Will, and Argyle and that group. I honestly think that was the weakest group. It definitely didn't have as much I'd have as much interest in that group, but they didn't focus on the group that much regardless. So it's not like it took up a big chunk of the season anyways. So that's okay. This season definitely has the biggest budget yet. It really shows with how beautiful the visual effects are, and the directing is just absolutely impeccable this season. It's definitely the best directed season in terms of how all the shots are done and how the action's choreographed. So damn good. And the cast is by far at its strongest here. In terms of acting performances, everyone is at their A game. Best acting from pretty much everyone. Dustin has an amazing performance in episode 9. Lucas obviously does as well. 11 does throughout the whole season. Max does in multiple episodes. I would say even Steve does. Eddie's really great this season. There's so many characters that just have standout performances, and it just blows my mind how these kids are so good at acting. Like, they really are incredible, especially in this season, more than any other season, except for Will. Will was better in season 2. Same with Mike. He was better. That's just because they didn't do much with them here. Well, actually, Will had like 1 or 2 good scenes towards the very end of the season in regards to his sexuality. They didn't like overtly say that, but they were obviously alluding to it. And I thought those were really well done scenes. He had great acting in those scenes. But again, they didn't do too much with his character or Mike in this season, so they didn't get as many moments as they might have in previous seasons, but they were still really strong in what they were given here. I guess Mike did have that one speech to 11 in episode 9, which I thought was really strong for him. So all the cast still given a lot of solid stuff here. Like I said, I believe most of the cast were at their best in season 4. The new locations here were pretty fun. I mean, Hawkins is an awesome location, but it does get a kind of old only seeing that throughout the whole show. So I really loved seeing California, Nevada, and Russia. It was just nice to see other places instead of just Indiana. So that was cool. I think the only thing I could say about the season that I didn't absolutely love is that there was a couple missed opportunities, especially towards the later half of the series or of the season. Specifically in terms of like character deaths. Like, I'm not one to say that they need a million character deaths for this show, because yes, this show does try to be more lighthearted a lot of the time. They don't want it to be that dark, so they're not going to kill off a bunch of characters. But I feel like season 5 is already going to be going in a very dark direction, so I think it would have made sense to kill off at least 1 or 2 more characters just to kind of really make everything very depressing going into season 5, where it's probably going to be a very dark and just grand season as a whole. But I don't really care, because I still think what they did in season 4 was brilliant towards the end with Eddie's death and Max's like kind of death. I don't know what you call it, but it was just so well done. So well done. So yeah, season 4 is incredible. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Let me know which seasons are your favorites or your worst favorites. I will see you all in my next one. Peace out.